I'm Joaquin Carbonara, the chair of the DSA program, and I am pleased to introduce today's speaker, Valerie Logan. Valerie is the CEO and founder of the Data Lodge, a company which provides data literacy services, including advisory services, a resource library, and boot camps. Valerie has over 28 years of experience in consulting in data and analytics strategy and change management. Before starting the Data Lodge, Valerie worked as a Gartner analyst, where she spent 4 years pioneering research in the area of data literacy, and in 2018 was awarded Gartner's Top Thought Leadership Award for her leadership in the area of data literacy. Valerie received her bachelor's degree in mathematics from Buffalo State and her master's degree in applied mathematics from New Mexico State University. Today, Valerie will be speaking about data literacy, what it is and why data literacy matters. So thank you for joining us today, Valerie. You can start whenever you are ready.
Thank you, Joaquin. I appreciate it. So hello, Buffalo State. It is great to be back. I wish I was actually there with you in person, where we could have this discussion in person, but we will enjoy this virtual exchange. And I am truly just happy to be invited back. I have really fond memories of my time in the math department at Buff State, and can tell you that my work there led to a really great career in this field. And so I was just saying to Joaquin before we started that I feel like my career has led me to this work, and given that you're on the early parts of your journey, I look forward to sharing a bit of my perspective and also hearing, how does this resonate for you when you are just starting out with your educational programs and about to enter the workforce. So let's get started. What I'd like to do is share with you 4 different topics. I like to use the phrase, do you speak data? And so we'll cover that a little bit, and what does that mean? Obviously, I'll talk about what is data literacy and why does it matter in both work and life, and then come back full circle about, from your perspective as either a math major, computer science major, data science, analytics, does that automatically mean you're data literate just because you have that specialty? Clearly, the way I wrote the topic says that it doesn't, and what you can do about it, and how I believe you can have a competitive edge as a candidate for, positions in the future by amping up your data literacy. So you're getting a little extra secret sauce today on how to differentiate yourself in the market. So just a little bit about this crazy concept called the Data Lodge. And I'm about 5 hours northeast of you up in the Adirondacks. And just a little bit about this business. As Joaquin mentioned, I left being a Gartner analyst about 1.5 years ago. And for those that haven't interacted with Gartner, it's a leading research and advisory firm where I was advising chief data officers. And you'll hear that term quite often in this presentation. And if you haven't been following the emerging nature of chief data officers or chief analytics officers, that of course is the new executive in town in corporations and governments, and is the executive responsible for data as a strategic asset and the sponsor of data literacy programs typically. So I left Gartner about 1.5 years ago, and I mainly was at the point where I was tired of talking about data literacy, and I wanted to roll my sleeves up and start helping these executives to build out these programs. And so that's what I'm doing. I built a virtual business, luckily, because last September, my envisioning of the worst case scenario was we could have a stock market crash. And instead I got a global pandemic. So luckily I built this business virtually, and even more luckily, I am serving a mission of helping organizations to make sense of their data in a critical time. So the Data Lodge serves these chief data officers. So if you haven't run into or heard of that role, about 5 years ago, the CDO was typically like an IT function reporting into like the CIO. It was very much sometimes crudely called like data plumbers, like, oh, you got to fix all the data. Now that role has really been elevated to primarily a business executive who is managing the data, right? Creating a trusted data foundation, stewarding analysis, stewarding the analytics and data science capability and driving innovation, and then also looking for ways to possibly monetize the data. So if these phrases aren't feeling familiar to you, I'd encourage you to read about the role of the Chief Data Officer, because chances are, if you are a math or data science major, there's a strong likelihood you would be hired into a CDO team or a team within the business who works with the CDO. So just a couple of nuggets there about the CDO role. So our mission at the Data Lodge is this idea of fostering data literacy beyond the specialists, right? So across the world, across companies. And I do that by, I believe that literacy is based on a language around data. And I coined that information as a second language, modeled after English as a second language. And I am, running this business from my little cabin in the woods in the Adirondacks. The way I'm doing this, so I'm not a consultant. I don't help one client at a time for 8 weeks. What I'm doing is, how there's those, on Facebook, you'll see like, hey, join my community to learn how to cook, or join my community to learn yoga. Well, I'm kind of doing that kind of a program where I am offering advisory services and virtual boot camps and a community for organizations that want to build a data literacy program. So it's like a train the trainer model. So my husband was saying the other day, okay, so you're a new entrepreneur in a new topic with a new business model. Great. But it's going well. I now have 10 clients, and I just signed my first federal agency, U.S. federal agency, and have clients in the UK as well. So things are going good. So Joaquin already mentioned I'm a math major from Buff State, graduated in '89, applied math, operations research at New Mexico State. My first job in position was with a phone company, and I spent 2 years out in the field in operations. This was US West in Seattle. And the reason I mention that is there's something irreplaceable about starting in a company where you learn the basic foundation of how a business operates. So back in the day, they had me join in the field, and just imagine orange safety vest, hard hat, right? Math major out in the field with a, hard hat on. But I learned about the basis of the company, how the company operated. And then I went into a corporate role where I learned about strategy and enterprise data and key performance indicators and things like that. Then I went into consulting for 20 years, kind of doing and leading at Gartner. And now I'm doing this work. So what else? I'm in Brant Lake. I don't know if anybody's ever been to Brant Lake, but just north of Lake George. And we're big Scrabble fans, literally. I don't know if you can see the Scrabble board has buffalo on it. So we are literally big Scrabble fans. And Cooper, who just made an entrance, is our mascot. He's our 1-year-old yellow lab. My clients love him, and he loves data too. So all of that to say, look what you can do with a beginning in a math or a data science background. It really is a blessed life, and I am thrilled to do this work. All right, let's dig in. Do you speak data? So first of all, in the chat, what I would love is if you could put into the chat, if you speak a second language, acknowledge how many languages you speak. If you speak 1, great. If you speak 2, great. Just go ahead and pop in there how many languages you speak. And this is my way of seeing if you're listening. So go ahead. And if you speak more than 1, go ahead and, if you wouldn't mind, just listing out what they are. So Tiffany has 1, Sue 1, VJ 3, Chris 1, Joaquin, a total of 3. Wait, who said just 1? Don't be sad. I only speak a little bit of French, but I see English and German. Oh, a native ASL speaker. Beautiful. Somebody's wondering if high school French counts. I hope so, because I'm counting it. Engineered monolingual. Interesting. English and Chinese. Does high school Spanish count? then maybe to Nepali and Hindi, English and Yoruba, Hindi and Telugu. Okay, awesome. Okay, ready for the next question. You know what I'm going to ask next. Do you speak data? 1 for yes, 0 for no in the chat. I see a 0.5. I love it, Tiffany. Thank you. Another 0.5. I should have expected that from you guys. Some zeros, some ones, some 0.5. Okay. So what do you think it means to speak data? I just want to take a second. Have you sit with that for a second. What do you think it means to speak data? Go ahead and pop ideas or thoughts into the chat. And some of this can be thinking about in your personal life, like how your friends and family do or do not speak data. Think about what COVID has been like for consuming the news, right? So Jonathan says, data flows, ISR, data representation, data usage, good. Does it involve the green screen in the matrix? Nice, love it. Descriptive statistics, understanding base rates, data which conveys some meaningful results from DJ. Joaquin says, speak is giving meaning to, nice. Anu says, data relevance. Paula, being able to read the newspaper stories or reports and able to understand. Yeah, so what I love about this topic of data literacy and this kind of cheeky phrase of speaking data is it all starts with making it personal, right? It all starts with this idea. This isn't some abstract corporate speak. This is, to what extent do I feel comfortable with data? Do I use data in my personal life? And how does that transcend into how comfortable I am and how well I use data, consume data, take action on data, understand the bias of data, and how does that manifest in your position in your career, right? So your personal life and your work life. So a couple other answers. Saqib says data equals understanding, being able to use it in presentations, Paula says. Violet says hypothesis testing, regression, statistics. All right, so these are all elements. What I'm going to share with you is a construct, a way to think about this. And what I'd love for you to do is just think, all right, how can this actually be a differentiator for me as I'm positioning for your first career, right? For your first position out of school. All right, so let's dig into it. So what is data literacy? So first of all, data literacy, data, of course, has been around forever, but why is data literacy emerging now as this like hot topic, right? So if you survey chief data officers and you say, what is the #1 challenge you have? Hands down, they say data culture, data skills, data literacy. So the reason is, the way we describe this is, what has happened is that we have this shift occurring right now where we're shifting from the way banks, telecom companies, retailers, hospitality organizations, they used to always think about improving the organization or improving the business through people, process, and technology. And if you're a veteran of you worked in companies for a long time, that's like a classic trinity, a classic way that, people view how do you change and improve a business. But with the digitization of our lives and our work, right, with IoT, right, Internet of Things, sensors everywhere, and the Fitbits monitoring our lives and our location intelligence of our phones and all of our transactions and social media history, right? I mean, with the digital lives that we're leading now, data has now been elevated as an equivalent peer to people, process, and technology. And if you haven't lived in a company that's been through like generations of this kind of change, that's actually a pretty big culture shift for a lot of organizations, because data has always been kind of relegated to the IT organization. And in the last decade, I would say it's been relegated to, smarty pants data scientists and data engineers and those digital native organizations like a Facebook, an Airbnb, or an Uber, whose lifeblood is their data. So one thing I would caution you on as you enter the workforce if you haven't been in the workforce already, is to realize that this is actually a change for a lot of classic employees in organizations, that data is now being elevated in this way. And this is why the chief data officer role is showing up, and this is why data literacy is becoming a workforce skill, not just a specialist skill, okay? So I approach fostering data literacy by embracing this as like a language, because it is so pervasive, right, across the specialist and really anyone, like a driver for UPS, a store clerk in Walmart, a call center representative for Marriott, right? Everyone needs to appreciate the value of data, the quality of data, and the analytics surrounding that. So when thinking about data literacy, let's get into the literal definition of it now. So it starts with this mindset, and it's a mindset that says data is really an element that you can consume like a language, and it's the ability to read, write, and communicate with data in context. So when I asked you if you spoke data, you immediately think, all right, in what context do I speak data? And there were different answers there that I could tell how you were thinking about data, like in consuming the news. So the ability to read, write, and communicate with data in context in both work and life. Now, if you Google search data literacy, there's a lot of people talking about data literacy for business. I think it's critical to make that connection with how we use data in our personal lives, because it makes it less abstract. And there are people in organizations today that are really scared of this topic, right? Why do you think data literacy, I'll just ask you guys, why do you think data literacy could create fear or vulnerability among employees? What do you think? Or does it create, is there a fear for you, right? I mean, why do you think data literacy, somebody says, hey, we're going to start growing data literacy in the company. Why do you think that would cause concern? Any thoughts? They think it will be used against them and they'll be fired. Could be uncertainty means it creates fears. It's complex. It's a complex practice. Folks don't always trust data, right? Oh, I want to read all these later. I can't keep up with all of them. People say, what are these numbers and where do they come from and how can I trust them, right? So there's one thing to appreciate is with data literacy, it is bringing up fear and vulnerability in people, often because they might fear being replaced in their job. They might have been kind of faking it, like pretending they knew what was going on in that dashboard when they really didn't. Or a lot of times in corporations, there are things like discussions of ethics and bias, and people sit around and they kind of, oh, there goes Cooper. They kind of nod politely, right? And they pretend to know when they really don't. So with data literacy, it really is a combination of that mindset that you can embrace literacy as a new skill in work and life, but fundamentally it's first based on vocabulary. So I want you to think about, with the vocabulary of data literacy, it's really three sets of terms. It's data terms, it's analysis terms, and it's business acumen. So when you think of analysis terms, given your field of study and the areas in which you're pursuing your education, the analysis methods are most likely going to be familiar to you, right? And for you, I want you to appreciate that analysis methods can be as simple as a bar chart, or it could be as advanced as machine learning algorithms or natural language processing, right? So the array of methods that you have for analysis or synthesis is what we mean by the language. And if that's what you study in your education, it's very native to you. For me, this is my specialty, right? I have this as my foundation. But people that, we know the type, right? They hate math, they hate statistics, they really consider having to learn math and statistics like going to the dentist. They hate it, right? So that part of the vocabulary is very scary for a lot of employees. So if this is your specialty, your ability to translate those methods and translate those concepts in ways that they can understand maybe in their personal lives or just with layman's examples becomes an incredibly powerful capability, right? Your ability to translate. The data terms are another interesting piece. So this is what sources of data, what types of data. Are they internal structured data like point of sale data, or is it maybe external unstructured data like comments in social media? So again, thinking of data with a very wide spectrum, a wide aperture of what are all the different types of data and data types. But the third part of the vocabulary is the part that a lot of people miss, which is how do you describe the problem you're solving, right? So if you go in and you have an analysis background and you're trying to decipher and understand the data sources, you need to make friends with those who obviously understand the business process, the workflow, the outcomes, the actions. So when looking at a problem that you're solving, it's always those three sets of terms. But historically, in a lot of companies, people have been bringing three people together for that conversation. It's like, all right, pull in the IT person for the understanding of the data structures, pull in the quant or the analyst, and then pull in somebody, a business analyst. Now we're seeing that language converge, where you need to understand a certain degree of the other two to be productive. Combining that, so hopefully that language piece resonates, that there's that basic vocabulary, but it's combined with some critical skills. The first is, how do you think? The second is, how do you engage with others? And the third is, at the end of the day, how do you take action and apply data constructively? So critical thinking is certainly, the scientific method, hypothesis test. Do you look for source and assumptions when you're presented data, right? Sorry, Cooper's going to town. Can you think critically? Engaging with others are things like data storytelling. Has anybody here taking any courses in data storytelling? Just share a yes if you've done maybe some training in data storytelling. So applying data then is, how do you actually make things make sense, right? How do you not lose the forest through the trees? How do you respect the ethics of using certain data sets, right? So I'm hoping that these are starting to resonate with you, that it's a mindset, it's vocabulary, and it's these skills, and I'll dig into them a little bit more. Joaquin's just saying that you're offering a storytelling class during the spring. Excellent. Storytelling is like as you would expect, it's the culmination of really applied data literacy. Okay, so let me give you a couple examples of what data literacy looks like from an individual perspective. So poor data literacy might be, and again, you can think of these in the context of like a company or a government agency or in your own family or friends. So poor data literacy could look like someone who immediately has a visceral reaction to a chart on COVID, right? They're not even, or voting, right? They're going to automatically just respond. Good data literacy is being curious, asking clarifying questions, not having that allergic reaction, asking what the source is, asking what assumptions were built in to what was being displayed. Another example of poor data literacy might be always going back to the reports and the metrics that you've always dealt with because you don't necessarily know what more to ask for, or you don't know how to ask a good question, or you don't know what's possible. Often I've had people say to me, I'm not a data person. Valerie, this whole data literacy thing, I'm not a data person. And they get kind of intimidated by this topic. And what I'll often say back is, oh, so you walk to work. And then they'll say, no, I said I'm not a data person. And I'll say, oh, you don't drive a car, right? Because we, as a driver, you're looking at a dashboard and you're using a GPS. We are natively data people. We just don't think of it that way, right? So this idea of meeting people where they are and acknowledging that there may be some fear and trepidation there, but then how do you actually say, it's okay? You know, we humanly are natural processors of information. So good data literacy might look like confidence in interacting with a dashboard, right? So there's lots of rollouts going on in companies of like Tableau and Click and Power BI as visualization tools. And good data literacy is someone who's confident interacting and having a conversation with the data. Another example of limited data literacy would be just not even knowing or really caring about where the data came from, or the lineage or the trust of the data, whereas good data literacy would be being able to hover over a data attribute and have it display the lineage and the definition. So data governance is a really big topic in organizations like this, where being able to create trusted, certified data and exhibiting that in the experience for the person using the dashboard would be a strong data literacy environment. And then the last, a good old classic of assuming a cause and effect relationship when there isn't one, versus being able to explain the difference between correlation and causality, and be able to explain it with like a good layman's example that your grandmother would get, right? So challenge yourself with whatever you're trying to explain a technique or an analytical method. Try to come up with really basic examples that people can relate to. There's a series, you know, the magazine Wired, on Wired.com, they have a series called, I think it's called Explain in 5 Levels. And it challenges experts to explain a topic like blockchain, for example, in 5 levels. And they start with someone who is like a 5-year-old, like explaining blockchain to a 5-year-old. And then it goes all the way up to like a PhD student. So, you know, challenge yourself that way. Can you explain, you know, an analytical concept or a data method or an outcome? Can you explain it in a way that people can really appreciate and get? So let's start with this idea of a vocabulary. So when I mentioned that there's business terms, data terms, and analysis terms, I actually, I just saw the comment that Paul put in. That's the way we always did it. Yep, that's a classic. That's a classic limited data literacy cultural example. So let's talk about the vocabulary. So when I mentioned business terms, data terms, and analysis terms, I created this little triangle. I seem obsessed with triangles, I just realized. But I created this little mnemonic as a way that we can help people to always come back to as a touchstone. Are we thinking comprehensively about the language of how we're using data or what problem we're solving? So I call it the VIA model. And the VIA model, the V is value, and it's what problem are you solving? What business value are you trying to derive? And how is that value realized? The I is information. Can you describe the data sources, the attributes, the data elements? And then finally, the analysis. What analytical method or data science method are being applied to the data? Can you guys give me an example of what you think? Let's start with the I. Let's pick an example. Let's use shopping on Amazon. So you know how when you shop on Amazon and then you come back into your Amazon instance next time and they have recommendations of other things to buy, right? It's a recommendation engine built on analysis, right? So what data, what do you think is the I in that example with Amazon? What information are they looking at? Previous purchases. Good, thanks, Brian. Search history. Excellent. Purchase and browsing. More clicks on the page, right, VJ? Demographics, love it, good. What have you added to your cart? Product ratings. In-market audiences, nice. So looking at personas. Voice analysis from other companies, nice, Brian. Okay, so you see how immediately you're starting to identify some data sources, right? And some of those are internal, some are external. Excellent. Reviews, good. Love that. So what do you think is the value? How would you describe, like, if you were working for Amazon and somebody said, yeah, we're using this data, what kind of value? How do you describe the business value drivers? How do you think business people at Amazon talk about that use of the data in that recommendation engine? What are they doing it for? What value are they trying to drive? Any thoughts? Revenue, yes. They're trying to get you to buy other things. Perfect. Jillian says dollars. That's right, dollars. Ooh, Violet, good one. A more customized experience. Love that, because they want you to come back. Satisfaction, absolutely. Ooh, Thomas, excellent. Determining ready inventory, right? So they don't want to sell you something that isn't necessarily in stock, or they want to create an experience that your expectations are met. Marketing. Deborah says manipulating the customer. Yep. Manipulating, managing the customer experience, however you want to put it. So there's a lot of different business value terms around profitability, customer experience, maybe something around different vendors. Maybe they have an overstock situation and they're trying to, reduce inventory. So there's so many different ways to look at that rich example around Amazon. Okay, so analysis. So you're sitting in a room and you're talking about what kind of methods are being applied to that information to derive that value. I know you'll have fun with this one. What kind of analytical methods do you think they use on this example? Brian, right. NLP, definitely natural language processing, right? Processing a lot of that content. What else? Could be chaos theory. Could be AI. Definitely plenty of AI algorithms in there. Inference. Artificial networks. ML, right? Machine learning, Violet says. Predictive modeling, right? Because you're wanting to look at the propensity for somebody to buy additional products. Search trees, forecasting. Maybe some pricing models, right? Some pricing forecasts. Probably some inventory optimization there. So do you see how just this one example, right? One example around something we can all relate to, like the Amazon experience, how you can take that and just see how different people bring different language and different pieces of the vocabulary together. So I take you through this because this is an incredibly powerful approach just to make sure that participants, either using that data or constructing solutions around that data, have a common playing field for a conversation around how we're solving problems. And while it may seem kind of simple and pedestrian, it's amazing how many times people don't realize how others do not understand part of the language. So I'll give you an example. So one of my clients is a big pharmaceutical company. And I have my clients do a little workshop with diverse participants from like the business and the data management team and the analyst team. And they brought together this group, and one of the people that was in the workshop is a data scientist who is incredibly talented. However, he's extremely introverted. And I can relate to that. I was actually really introverted till I was about 23. And he, by the end of the workshop, he actually was acting as a spokesperson for reading out on one of the exercises for the group. So in a corporation, when you have someone who is known for, that people said they had never heard his voice, they had great respect for his work, but had never heard his voice, and then you create an environment where he feels like he can participate to the point where he's acting as a spokesperson, there's something pretty magical there about creating a comfortable space for people to share this shared language around data. So I just wanted to share that with you as an example of the power of what can happen when you create the space for the shared language. So just wrapping up kind of this idea of language. So I shared the VIA model, this idea of the three sets of terms. So just be on the lookout for that now, right? It's like when you buy a red car, you see red cars, right? So now you'll start seeing things through the VIA lens, and then realize there's different dialects, right? That language, if you're working with HR on some workforce analytics, or if you're working in a hospital on patient outcomes, right? You contextualize that vocabulary with these different scenarios. So you start developing dialects and specialties based on what data you know and what problems you solve. You then have those constructs of helping people to think, engage, and apply. And then there's different levels of proficiency, right? Not everybody has to be a rock star data scientist. It's appropriate to have certain level of conversational ability and then to have different degrees of fluency. So I just wanted to share that with you. Here's a little bit more on kind of digging into the thinking, engaging, and applying. These are different types of techniques and concepts that you can study more on, including data storytelling. So I'm sure you can have fun looking into this a little bit more. So there are 5 myths on data literacy that come up all the time. One is data literacy is just training. So hopefully you're seeing now training is certainly a key piece, but it is more than training, right? You don't learn a language just by going to a training, right? You engage with others, you immerse yourself, you try things out. Another is people think data literacy is just about internal structured data and stats. It's more than that, right? More methods, more types of data. The third is people think data literacy is just visualization because a lot of the big visualization vendors had brought it to market, right? It's bigger than that. It's a key piece, but it's more. It's not about making everybody a junior data scientist, right? There is room for specialists here and generalists, right? We don't have to make everybody an expert in data science. And this is relevant to our lives. This is relevant to our not just our work, but our personal lives. Okay, so why does this matter? Why does this matter in work and life? So the need for a shared language. I want you to think about all the different potential roles that you could take hiring into an organization. With your backgrounds, it is a golden key. The capabilities and the techniques and your interest and your passion in this area is so powerful in organizations. And there are so many different routes you can take. One of the things I do with my clients is I paint this picture of all of the different kind of roles and types of creators and consumers in an organization. So you've got like the chief executives towards the top, you've got architects and engineers on the left, data scientists, you've got business functions and analysts on the right, you've got frontline associates at the base of the model. The point of this is you will have people who are creators and consumers, and the degree of data literacy matters to each. So creators, by definition, they major in data and/or analytics, right? If you're a data scientist, it's your job, it's your career, it's what you're passionate about. You will major in these areas. Consumers probably major in, a nurse majors in frontline operations. A call center manager is all about the customer experience, right? They have different majors. The question is, how much data literacy do we need to enable them with to maximize data in their role? So the need for a shared language is, this diversity is healthy, but if you don't call attention to this language around data, what happens is you'll get natural disconnects and friction. So here's a little dirty secret of what happens in corporations. There's data hoarders. People hoard data in business functions, and sometimes it's political, data's power. Sometimes it's they just don't know how that data could be beneficial to other parts of the organization. So you get this kind of data governance work and data catalog work, but if you don't meet people where they're at in appreciating how they use data for different needs, you'll never break through that roadblock. So what you want to do is start appreciating how people have different diversity in their backgrounds. So depending on what industries you've worked in, what domains. I used to work at Tops. When I was in Buff State, I used to, pay for my rent working at Tops down on, I forget what road it was. And I'll tell you what, I knew, I had that frontline customer experience, right? There's some days I still wish I was scanning cans at Tops. But everybody's experience matters, right? You bring something to the language based on either your analytical prowess, your operational experience, your data understanding. But look at the last one on that diversity, veterans versus rookies, right? I don't know how many of you are like returning adult students versus, kind of in college in your 20s. But if you're a rookie joining an organization, you're going to be working with a lot of vets. You'll be working with a lot of veterans in this area, and they're going to have a different way of talking about data and analytics. So appreciating the shared language becomes a tool for you. So when talking about why this matters, I want to give you some of the language of how companies talk about this. Because as you're approaching positions, entering the workforce, these are kind of the big drivers of why data literacy. So the very first one is companies, government agencies, nonprofits, they're rolling out these self-service dashboards, right? They're rolling out so that people don't just go to the quant team and say, hey, can you build me a report? They're rolling out self-service dashboards. Well, dirty little secret is there isn't the degree of adoption and confidence in using those dashboards as expected. Companies are spending tens of millions of dollars rolling out these environments, and they're not getting the adoption they expected, or they're not necessarily sure if they're being used responsibly. So data literacy becomes one of the levers to start growing that confidence and increase the usage and democratize the access. The second one is there's a general need, you might hear this phrase, future of work, which is how are we modernizing the workforce overall from a digital perspective. So this can be robotics, it can be sensors, it can be more agile, right? There's all of these different elements of becoming more digital. Data literacy is a cornerstone of becoming more digital, upskilling the workforce. Yeah, just giving you some key phrases for your interviews. The third one is we need to free up capacity from the data scientists and data engineers and remove the dependency. A lot of people are very dependent on being spoon-fed their information, and we need to create more of that independence so that talent capacity is freed up. Data quality. Frontline associates have the direct impact of affecting data quality. So, maybe it's my UPS driver who always signs my name rather than having me sign, or maybe it's the Tops clerk or the Wegmans clerk who is not caring to look up the code, so they always hit, a certain code for bananas, right? I mean, data quality on the front line affects, right? There's such a cost associated with data quality. So helping people appreciate that and be part of the solution. The last piece is we're hearing a lot of questions and discussions around ethical usage of data, data bias. How do we share data? How can you monetize data? And to productively engage in discussions of those topics requires a basic understanding of what are you trying to solve, what data is available, and what kind of analytical methods are possible. And what can AI do? What can facial recognition technology do? So at the root of productive conversations like this, an appreciation of the VIA model is a basis, right? Just to even be able to understand just the idea of like triangulating data sources. Think about ancestry DNA data, right? Yeah, you have 2 data points, you can't do very much. You add a 3rd data point and you can figure out what's going on in families, right? So that appreciation of data lineage matters. So I hope this is helping just to really even give you some of the corporate speak of how these needs and drivers manifest and why data literacy matters. I'll also tell you, I'm watching Indeed, and I have an alert set up for data literacy in job descriptions because I'm seeing more and more that it's gaining traction. And I am seeing a steady rise of data literacy now in job descriptions. So again, it's a great advantage for you to start. I'm going to give you some resources here in a minute to start growing your data literacy capabilities and start leveraging that into your resume and your interviewing, because it will distinguish you from other candidates. So one story I want to leave you with before I give you some resources and open it up for questions is this story of Ford Motor. So in 1914, this is actually an example of a classroom, a picture of a classroom at Ford Motor, and it was called the English School, the Ford English School. So imagine you were a plant manager. You're running a manufacturing plant back in the early 1900s at Ford. What would have been happening with the worker population in 1914? Where would those workers have been coming from? Any thoughts? Immigration, exactly. Great, Thomas. So what happened in the early 1900s was there was a strong immigration population, and a lot of the workers in the plants were immigrant workers from different countries with different native languages. Right? So what started happening was there were issues with safety and efficiency because there wasn't a basic commonly shared language. It wasn't anybody's fault. There was no blame. It was just a reality that people came from different backgrounds and they couldn't necessarily connect and communicate in a way that would benefit productive operations. So Ford started the Ford English School, leveraging a lot of the elements of English as a second language, to say, you know what, we need to create this common shared language. So I believe that we are at the same point. 100 years later, we're in this, where data is the shared language, where the individuals in the seats are people from different backgrounds, different diverse backgrounds, maybe not necessarily around an English language, but data as a shared language. So what you're learning here with data literacy and information as a shared language is the new shared language. Right? And I think it's the new differentiator. I just can't help but pass this picture without acknowledging I would hope to see more diversity in the room in today's virtual classroom, certainly more women and a lot more diversity in participants in the community. And I'm sure we would have that. So a couple of little quick cartoons. Actually, you can look at these on your own. One about the eeny, meeny, miny, mo methodology for being data driven, or the data bias cartoon around the big data report on dogs, not including cats, and then how KPIs and dashboards, what's the one going to zero? It's, the understanding. So anyway, some fun cartoons you can play around with to support some of the concepts. So just finishing it out, why does this matter to you? I'll just tell you, I love this quote. We don't see things as they are, we see them as we are. And every single one of you has a background and a passion and are interested in solving problems. And the question is, how do you want to show up in the workplace? What do you want to be when it comes to the VIA model? Do you want to be able to equally solve a problem and be great in the V, the I, and the A? Is your specialty the I, and you just want to dominate and be the deepest in the information space? Do you just really want to focus on the data science, and you need to have, a degree of understanding of the value in the information? What is it that you're trying to be in the workplace? There is room for all of those, but be clear on your intent, right? Because if you're in the analysis area and you want to solve problems, but you haven't recognized how to speak that dialect on the value side, you need to work on that. You need to build relationships with people that are really strong on that. So be clear about what your interest is. Let me go back to that. So in the chat, not necessarily where is your personal strength, but what would you like to be known for? Would you like to be known for being strong in the value? Answer 1, information 2, analysis 3, or 2 of them or 3 of them? What do you want to be known for? 1 and 2, 1, 2 and 3, 2 and 3. Awesome, 3. I like that some people are saying 3. It's totally fine to be a specialist in data science and analysis, right? We need specialists in that, but we also need people who can bring the whole solution together. Okay, thanks for playing along on that. So how does this relate I would just say to you, if you're focused on the information and the analysis, look at the context, right? Look at the value, look at the dialects, and look at these skills around the different thinking, engaging, and applying. And all of these together will make you a productive contributor. So a few resources for you. One is the Data Literacy Project. It is a set of resources with assessments and training resources on how to grow those different competencies. It's sponsored by Click, but a ton of free resources. Great elements. Certainly my work at the Data Lodge. I have a series of webinars that you can watch. And there's a nice LinkedIn group on data literacy advocates if you want to hang out with 1,800 people who are really passionate about this topic. Here's some games, a nice list of games that you could use to bring into experiences and problem solving. A nice group that my friend Ben put together, and also a series of books. If you want to learn more on data literacy, some people call it data fluency, data storytelling aligns. These are some great resources for you. And my webinars. So that is it.
Thanks so much. This was a very, very nice presentation. And we would love to hear some questions from the audience. But may I ask a question? I like, all the audience to ask questions, and I don't want to take too much space, but I was wondering, would you say a few words about the different dialects in data literacy, and any observations that you can share with us?
Yeah, so the dialects are an interesting concept, because if someone, there's a couple thoughts. So one is, if you've worked in a specific, if you've been solving problems with data and analysis in a certain industry, you naturally develop that dialect by industry sector. So whether that is working in hospitality or working in financial services, the dialect is both what are the business outcomes, the V and the VIA, as well as getting familiar with the data sources that are native to that industry. So, in financial services, for example, there's all of the elements around regulation, right, and compliance. So understanding the nuances of the data, as well as the problems and the constraints related to that industry. Similar for business functions. So if it's HR in the workforce, right, all of the different elements of understanding HR workflow and the nuances of privacy of employee data, right? So you start to develop out, the V and the I are typically what becomes specialized with the dialect. Does that make sense, Rocky?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, very much so. And actually, that is one of the things that I wanted to bring about, is that the dialects, which of the VI or the A, a lot of the dialects examples that seem to surface are more in the A, but the fact that the all three really have their own, the own development, the dialects is important. Yes, that's exactly, makes a lot of sense. Yes, thank you.
Good. I was just taking a look at some of the comments and questions. Someone else is saying, Paul S. was saying, I participate in city politics, but not as a politician, rather as a way of advising. Being in a small city, I'm interested in bringing data fluency to the city. I love that. Paul, I would encourage you to take a look at, as kind of a proxy, go out and look at, San Francisco has done a lot around a data academy from more of a civic lens. So they're one of the examples. You can send it in a link to be included with the follow-up. But if you want to, even though San Francisco is probably a bigger city than Buffalo or what you're looking at, there's a lot to be learned from what they've done. And New York City too, as Paul was saying. VJ says, how is CRM going to play in the data journey? So CRM is really one of the dialects, right? So customer data, customer experience, call center data, anything related to customer data really could be viewed as a specialty, right? A specialty in a dialect from a data literacy perspective. You're welcome, Paul. hopefully this has just ignited some thoughts and some ideas, and also helped each of you to see the power you have with being incredibly strong in the A in particular. I can tell you just from my own background, just being able to help people understand the analysis that I was doing and be a good translator of those capabilities has been gold in my career. So, you know, work on doing that. And if you'd like to connect on LinkedIn, please do. I'm happy to support anyone if you're trying to make connections and you'd like to leverage my network. I am Buff State proud, so let me know what I can do to help you guys out. Oh, thank you so much. Please connect on LinkedIn, and yeah, anybody that wants to share, kind of spread the word. You know, you're on the forefront of this. You know, I have 10 organizations that are pioneering this work with me, including a major Silicon Valley entertainment company, a bank in London, a federal agency. So I can tell you this is pioneering work, and I really do believe that your interest in this, you know, will pay off in the job market.
Thanks everybody for coming, and then have a great rest of the evening. We'll see you soon.